Hi everyone, my name is Roland and I am the team lead at Muwado, Africa's storytelling platform. So if you haven't heard of Muwado, we are an online platform, muwado.com, muwado.com. And we are a community of about 2,000 plus African storytellers that are just enjoying each other's stories and connecting through, our experiences and our shared relatable stories. So Muwado is also very big on trying to monetize these stories so that the creatives who are telling these stories can make a living, make some income of the story. So that's a very big component of our agenda and our mission. So to further this, we organized the Art of Commercial Storytelling webinars to help the members on our platform, first of all, get a refresher on the basics of storytelling, be it fiction or non-fiction, or even audio storytelling, but also to just introduce them and take them on a deeper dive on digital storytelling, which is what we practice because we're based online. But lastly, we also wanted to just shine a light on the commercial aspect of storytelling for those who are serious and who want to make some income of this talent that they've been given. So that's the purpose of these webinars. And we look forward to seeing you in as many of them as we can. And at this juncture, I'll pass on to the facilitator to begin. Thank you.
Cool. Great. No, thank you so much, Roland, for inviting me to facilitate this session. It's one of the most exciting, a topic that's very close to my heart. Special thanks to everybody who took the time to attend. Again, I will try as much as possible to, share as much as I can. I know we have very limited time, 2 hours. But the first hour will be, or the first 45 minutes, I'll just kind of walk you through a presentation, and then hopefully we can have a hands-on in the next hour, and then a Q&A as well. Again, the session is telling Africa's story, or really African stories with AI and multimedia. And I will try to kind of provide a buffet of tools, but also a buffet of the mix of technologies that we're seeing right now that are really shaping the creator landscape. AI, generative AI specifically being one of them that's really close to the industry. There's a lot of contestation around that, but there's also a lot of excitement. I'm a reckless optimist, so forgive me if I seem to be overly excited about these technologies and the possibilities that they present for a continent such as ours. On the multimedia end, we'll also touch and give a snapshot into some of the other technologies also emerging, also considered disruptive, that really sit nicely within this sector and bring to life stories and traditional formats of documentation of storytelling. So in that context, I'll speak largely about a space that I'm really passionate about as well. That's the extended reality landscape, virtual augmented reality, specifically augmented reality, because it touches really closely with the group that's here. And hopefully at the end of this all, you will be able to walk away with a thing or two. But for me, at the end of the day, it's a sense of curiosity that to me is always the biggest takeaway. And then we can also dive a little bit deeper into the specifics if time permits. The texts are quite different. So I'll try again to give bits and pieces of that. For the very hands-on session, I know one of you did mention that you wanted to just get more thorough on the generative AI side of things. If room permits, we'll also be able to do that. But as Roland said, I'm Lorna Okeng. I'm very many things, but in a nutshell, I'm really a creative technologist, strategic foresight practitioner, and extended reality curator. So where is this? Okay, that's enough about me. I think that was already mentioned. But I like to start with this, just setting the stage for what disruptive technologies are and why, for me particularly, they are very, very exciting, especially for a continent such as ours. I like to say some of these technologies, generative AI being one of them, or AI in general being one of them. And on the other hand, extended reality, which is virtual and augmented reality. I'll use the words XR, AR, VR interchangeably, but just bear with me for now. These technologies, I like to think they haven't been colonized yet. And there's also room for contestation for that, because for me, now more than ever, Africa kind of has a level playing stake in all of this. All of these technologies are being developed as they are being deployed. And for the very first time, we are not necessarily playing catch up. And the reason I can use the example of the previous digital revolution, or what they would consider the third or the fourth industrial revolution. I think it was the fourth industrial revolution. Africa kind of was left behind, in the sense that when the first phase of the internet came forward, we weren't necessarily part of it. But then we saw a massive break in the 1990s with the rise of the telcos. The telcos came in, the MTNs, the UTLs and the Celtels of that time, class of 1996, and everything just changed totally. So the mobile phone, specifically the dummy phone, just dismantled sectors in ways that the world had not necessarily imagined. For a continent such as ours, where maybe the technologies were not designed with us in mind, the world was amazed at how Africa took this piece of tech and ran with it. I think the story of mobile money is one that's often used very often, because mobile money, while we got the telco came in, just trying to provide more opportunities for access, but then we began to see different techs build on that foundation. So mobile money would technically not work anywhere around the world in the West, but it works excellently in the global South, specifically in countries such as ours. And it disrupted the financial sector that 10 or 15 years ago, kind of sending money across the continent was almost paralyzing. But now we have, the telco being one of the biggest financial banks. And that is a scenario which I often use to give us a picture of what the future really does hold, especially when we interact with these technologies. I say the African market is very peculiar. What was built for the world may not necessarily work for us, but what works for us may not necessarily work for the world. And that's why these technologies become very exciting for me, especially AI right now, because the lens through which they are being built, or the lens through which the rest of the world is interacting with them, may not necessarily be the way Africa will embody it. So again, disruptive technologies, the beauty about them is their scalability. And I always use this, I'll start with this, just setting the stage, because there is just a lot of fear around what these technologies can do. There's also a lot of regulation that's happening currently, that the tech is being regulated in real time. And this only emerged in in 2019, 2018, after the Cambridge Analytica saga, where the big techs had been operating kind of with no sense, in a kind of free market for over 20 years since the internet became mainstream. And now there's a big push around data sovereignty, who owns the data, especially knowing how much money these guys make out of data. So now AI or tech is kind of being regulated in real time. And that's why you're seeing a lot of interest from all places, all angles, including, the inclusion of Black people, the inclusion of women, the inclusion of people, minority groups, persons with disabilities. That sense of inclusion is also being included as the techs are being developed. Okay, I'll start with this because it's my favorite story. In 100 years ago, in the 1930s, 1920s, I guess, films were silent. Silent in the sense that it was just motion. Actually, there were motion pictures, and then you would hire a living musician. You would hire an actual living musician to. Sorry. You would hire a living musician to come and just kind of play as the motion silent picture is playing. And that was really cinema until I think it was Disney in the 1928 created the very first film with music. So it actually did not need a live musician. And there was this war, this is one of it. There was a huge campaign against what they called mechanical music, or what they called recorded music or robotic music, because the musicians at that time said, somebody's taking over our jobs. Robots are taking over our jobs. They want to replace us. But what is really fascinating is 100 years down the road, the music industry is one of the most technologically driven. In fact, it changes every 5 years. We saw from the CDs now to this online streamers disrupting the space. So beyond live music, the digital realm of music is the most commercial. It's the most lucrative as well. And music then evolved into what they would call dramatic forms of royalties. I think one piece of music now has different forms of royalties, and it's collected all over. So what that means is what technology did then was not necessarily replacing musicians. We still have musicians today. It's just that musicians now, their work is scalable. You no longer have to have Davido, playing at your wedding, but we are still able to enjoy them. But in other formats, such as the visual arts, you still have that kind of traditional format where it's one still piece that has to be enjoyed. And it has allowed artists, and specifically musicians, to become one of the wealthiest creative people. You'll see that the same with film and other creative formats. It's scalability. So again, 100 years ago, it was improbable that canned music, which was recorded music, would replace real musicians. Now, the reality is films at that point, they never managed to duplicate living musicians. We still have them because they didn't have to. What disruptive technologies often do is they really don't seek to replicate. What they do is they just do sidestep, bypass old standards and make those standards redundant. So then everybody has to catch up, or you become obsolete. What's also beautiful about them is their scalability. Is records and talking films made music cheaper and more accessible to a much larger audience. Most of the audiences didn't really care about the traditional quality. So I'm setting this stage because I know a lot of the questions will come, AI, what does that mean? What are the opportunities? It's taking over the job of artists. I don't think it is. I think it is a fantastic tool that will work very wonderfully with artists. And this is just a trip down memory lane that 100 years from now, nobody will really care what is AI or what is human-generated work. Okay. So why story? I used just give me just okay, cool. So on the element on the point of why stories matter, so we are truly the custodians of the stories that we tell. I think we are all tired of this old dated narrative. This is the Economist, the whole, speaking about Africa. I did a quick search before this, and still on Times, this is the news that's happening. The war in Darfur, just crazy stuff. And this is truly the narrative. And there's a lot of contestation of who tells your story. And the reality is we can choose to sit on the sidelines and have people tell our stories, or we can hold the mantle and choose to tell the stories in the way that we want to tell them. On the other side of the coin, it is a responsibility that we are the custodians of our narratives, and we have a place to play. I think that's one of the reasons why a platform such as this has been created, of Africa rethinking and shaping and taking control of its narrative. The fascinating thing about media is we are truly shaped, or human psychology, we are truly shaped by what we see, what we read, and what we hear, and therefore the media determines what cultures look like and determines or reinforces prejudices. So again, this is the reality on why stories matter and why Africa now has to take a center stage in telling its particular story. But again, how do you tell a story, or how do you pass on a message in a world that is overwhelmed with too much information? A philosopher that I really love called Alain de Botton has an interesting way of saying it, that there's two ways to control people. One is to overwhelm them with information, And that's the time that we are living in, because there's just too much information that you don't know what happened yesterday. None of us can recall the news last week because there's just too much information. On the other hand, you can play the China card or the North Korea card, where it's just remove information from people. So we find ourselves, especially Uganda, where we sit today, there's just too much information. So how do import, so journalists and storytellers find themselves in some kind of crossroad that people are not paying attention to what matters. Why are people interested in peculiar topics but not interested in interesting things? Again, it goes back to just playing with the psyche of people and understanding what stories sell and how to tell stories in compelling ways. Thank God we have new formats of storytelling that allow journalists to explore alternative routes to compete with the new news overload, or this kind of like knowledge economy that we are in. Okay. Again, multimedia elements really do elevate storytelling. And again, why are we using multimedia? Because what we're doing is we're providing a buffet of ways of representation beyond literature. Again, truly, as I said before, we are shaped by what we read, hear, and see. And therefore, we need to figure out the human mind, what people are consuming, how they consume, and how we, kind of like plug into that realm. So multimedia, typically, the beauty about it is its ability to, one, evoke emotion. It's very emotive. It's memorable. It's truly memorable. The reason why you can remember a cathedral and not necessarily a lecture room is because cathedrals, at least the traditional cathedrals, were designed with all these artifacts. They created a sense of opulence, of escape, of fantasy that allowed people to run to church every Sunday because there was that kind of like a heavenly feeling. And the church understood this in multimedia formats. The Catholic Church in particular largely invested in its art, in its music. So when you walk into a cathedral, you're welcomed with wonderful hymns before the priest or the reverend even takes you through. And then you look up and you see these fantastic artworks, which are almost like billboards, the painted windows, etc. So what they really wanted to do was to put it in your mind and make it as memorable as possible that you are able to return. And then, of course, it's able to attract wider audiences. People who would normally not meet on the streets will all converge in a cathedrogram. You won't necessarily get that same energy in a prison or in a lecture hall. So that's the same mindset when we talk about multimedia formats. Is we are trying to play with the human psyche and try to make sure that, one, it's emotionally compelling to them, it's relatable, it's memorable, and we are able to attract wider audiences. There's multiple formats. I will not go too much into this, whether it's audio, we have the podcasts, we have soundscapes, and now immersive sound, which I'll speak about later. On the video elements, video side of things, docuseries, character-driven narratives. We are gamifying now. On the graphic ends, you also have ways in which to, visually storytell a lot of literature. Tools, there's an abundance of them. I just give a snapshot of these high level because these are some of the pieces that people easily use and can relate to. But I will dive into the specifics per the multimedia format. Okay, going into, let me look at my time. Okay, going into artificial AI and storytelling. Now that the fear has been taken away, that we are looking at this new technology simply as an ally. And I'll really re-emphasize that AI is not here to replace any storytellers. I don't think it can. I think what it can really do is that it takes away all the chaos and it enhances your creativity. You focus on the creativity. It takes away all of this kind of like mundane stuff and speeds up your workflow quite frankly. And I will just give a brief example of one of the filmmakers who broke it down to me in a way that was so okay. So I'll come back to the use of AI, but I said it is part of the workflow. So if you are a filmmaker, you have a friend or a colleague or a workmate or an assistant, but can walk you through the entire value chain. I think one of the struggles with our ecosystem right now has been one particular a filmmaker wearing multiple hats. He's the director, or she's the producer, she's the scriptwriter, she's doing all of these things, which typically are very specialized skills that could take, a team of 10 to 15 or even 30 to produce. So now what this allows us to do is that it takes away those kind of like processes that a filmmaker would feel themselves burdened to do, and allows them to really focus more on not on the creative lens, focus more on that kind of thing, and kill away some of those mundane processes. So I'll give the example here I'm using is mostly for like a script, someone creating a piece of film, but it would apply to any other domain as well. So in terms of brainstorming ideas, one of the things that has been critiqued about the African cinema landscape has been the weakness of narrative, or the weakness of story. And to be fair, it's because we also may not have the resources to bring in writers, or even authors, or even the ability to adapt pieces of literature that already exist. So to be able to brainstorm ideas on a particular narrative, AI allows you to do that. Platforms as easy as ChatGPT can allow you to frame concepts, topics, for all types of pieces. And even interestingly, I think one of the things I tested quite recently with DeepSeek is you can even borrow character, you can even borrow lenses through which some prominent directors look like, think through. So I was testing, a particular narrative. How would Shonda Rhimes write it versus how would James Cameron write it, or how would Isaac Asimov write it? And just on DeepSeek, I literally said, can you generate for me brainstorm for me certain ideas around this, and generate for me scripts in this regard? And interest, or how would Shakespeare write that? Or even how would Ngungi wa Thiong'o do that? Or how would any of you in this room do that? And it can generate all that for you. And then you begin to see a bit of, kind of interesting diversity in narrative that you can tweak or work with if need be. On the visual element of side and the visual side of things, storyboarding and creating mood boards, you have an abundance of tools. The most prominent right now are DALL-E and Midjourney. And then if you want to animate them and turn video into image to video, then you have the likes of Runway AI that can allow you to do that. For musicians on the other side, also in the musical realm, there are different types of copyright, the audio, the sound recording, and the composition. So a lot of the composition may not necessarily be written by the artist, the vocal artists themselves. You have the opportunity to test that and generate an experiment with tools such as, still on ChatGPT, but by extension to tools like Suno. An example of, we've had this, I think a lot of you have seen the works of Malik. Malik is a filmmaker based in Nigeria who, last year when I think Midjourney, at the peak, early last year, he was experimenting on the concept of a fashion runway for elderly people, and this took the world by storm. It's traveled. He has gotten a dedicated. He got a dedicated fashion show line, I think in Paris Fashion Week the other year. Simply because of this experimentation. Now, Malik is a traditional filmmaker. And why his case is quite fascinating is he described how easy it was and how difficult it was also to use this particular tool, and how challenging it was against the tradition, his natural format of filmmaking. Two things that he did mention, that these tools are largely, the algorithms and the data sets are very limited in terms of Black people or Africa. Again, to be fair, because they're largely training on internet, and the internet does not necessarily have a full representation of the world's information. So then he said something quite interesting, and he said that he had to train his own AI. He had to prompt Mid-Journey quite thoroughly to be able to come up with the kinds of prompts that generated the kinds of pieces that he wanted. And that took us to another level of prompt engineering, then becoming a new skill in itself. That there is one thing to be able to generate, but then there is one thing to have the knowledge of creating and using that knowledge as a prompter. And that's, I guess, what then separates the general user from somebody who already has the technical knowledge. But what he also said quite interestingly was that what he was able to do in 3 months, he could do in 1 day. Traditionally in film, he needed 3 months post-production and etc. He could actually get the same artifacts, get the same assets, model them out and tell the same story similarly in a day. So for him, he said, it's bought me more time. It's bought me more time to tie my narrative, but it's also bought me more time to make money, because in a world that's capitalistic and time is money, you're being billed for your time, the time spent. So if he's not spending a whole year on a film set trying to make sense of one piece, and he can do that in an hour or 2 days or a week, it's a win for him. So this was a particular interesting case. And also what is very important to notice is that new markets then begin to emerge, right? So while he was just prompting this, and of course it went viral, there was a dedicated fashion show that was created because of his body of work that did not exist in the previous fashion shows. Again, a new realm of creators is going to be born, but also a new realm of value chains, a new realm of opportunities is going to be born that is parallel to the existing one. Also speaking to filmmakers, the Oscars right now, the Emmys right now recognize not necessarily AI, but recognize immersive films. There's been a dedicated set for that, and I'll speak about that later. But also interestingly, platforms such as Runway have created dedicated AI festivals. You have platforms like, I think Cannes also has one now. Sundance and the Tribecas are opening up spaces for, what they call experimental and new media art. Or new media storytelling. So there is a global interest, and there is a global network and new realms of spaces where these bodies of work can be celebrated and are invited. Okay, this one is kind of like the practical side, so I think we'll come back to this later. But this was just a snapshot into, kind of a starter pack. Some ideas to play with, whether you want to create, so the whole value chain from script to film, you can generate experiments on ChatGPT or DeepSeek to get your narrative. ChatGPT now has some really good some really good image prompts are coming through. So you can also experiment on that. So what typically happens, you have a script, generate it on a platform like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, etc. You have the body of script, you want to turn them into images, right? Image formats. And then you definitely use platforms such as, what is it called? Magic Design, as he was saying on Canva. Canva has magic, I think it was, yeah, it has its magic dedicated AI platform. It can turn text to images. You can also use, the Mid-Journeys, the DALL-Es, and then layer it on another level and create the image and create the motion pictures that you would move that piece. Literally, if you move it to a platform like Runway, then you get the video version of the text, and then patch that up, very similar to what happens in comics. I think comics go scene by scene, and then kind of like merge that together. And then on another level, if you're creating sounds, you want to play with a tool like creating music or voiceovers, you can play with tools like Suno. Again, one thing that I have to put right now, because I have to flag it, there's an ethical element right now that's lots of contestation around the role of AI. Uganda doesn't necessarily have a dedicated one, but I'm sure we will ratify against what's happening at the AU, which will also ratify what's happening on the global scene. So it's always good to follow what's happening in that regard, because it's changing every other day around the ethics of using these kinds of tools, especially AI, but also being respectful of that. But also in terms of who owns, just making sure that you understand the copyright and the licensing associated with that, how to protect your work, but also how to use AI work and the kinds of credits and how you have to give credit or reference that body of work. In terms of originality, I think especially for Africa with an abundance of stories, there is just so much that we can explore that's in a more affordable way. What you would previously need, I think indie filmmakers, indie storytellers, indie authors, there's indie animators. This is a place for you to really tinker and experiment, but also adding to this, every storyteller, since we are dealing with IP, you have the opportunity to diversify your IP, and I think AI allows us to do that really beautifully. So if you are an author, and you have a piece of literature, you can gamify your literature. You can turn your literature, which is still your IP, into a comic book. You can turn it into a game, whether it's a video game or a board game. You can turn that same piece into art, visual art. You can merchandise. You can turn that body of work into, what is it called? Into a film adaptation. So this also opens up multiple realms for storytellers to get your IP existing in different commercial formats, right? Beyond just the format in which it exists. So you're beginning to see a lot of cross-pollination where a filmmaker, an author's work kind of then finds itself with about 7 to 8 different forms of IP, which are still your work, right? Because you just use tools to convert those bodies of work into other forms of IP. Yeah, so again, tell your story in your way. I keep saying tech is simply an amplifier. Okay, I will then jump to another multimedia frontier platform medium of storytelling, which is extended reality, what I'm calling XR. And in XR, you will find extended reality. You'll find augmented reality and virtual reality storytelling. So in terms of definitions, a lot of us have easily interacted with AR already. If you've used a filter, any of those filters in your phone, Snapchat, Instagram, any filter is a form of augmented reality. What's basically happening is that you're adding some kind of interactive layer onto your reality. So it doesn't necessarily cut you from your reality, just kind of augments these interactive or virtual or kind of 3D generated pieces. On the other hand, virtual reality, which a lot of us have already seen, anybody wearing those kind of gadgets, literally cuts you out of your real world and it transports you to an alternative world, a computer-generated world that gives you the illusion that you are in that world when you're not necessarily in it. So you've probably seen, 360 film, 360. If you use Google Street View, that's an easy piece of kind of like a virtual reality. It kind of has mimicked a whole world and it's putting it for you to engage with. And now we have pieces, films that are more immersive, more interactive, that you can be able to create. And this also falls in literature. It applies in multiple formats. Again, these are simply mediums of storytelling. They're not, the tech is simply the tool. It is not the art. Okay. And those are some of the pieces of work that if you get a chance, do check out. Black Rhino's work in wildlife, virtual safaris, etc. I think I've talked about that. On a wider scope, and this I think may be interesting to you, a lot of what I'm speaking about may sound foresight, but it's also the field that I practice in, and it's also the field that I feel artists and creators have a lot of opportunities to tap into. Again, you've probably heard of the metaverse. It is a futuristic concept, but it's a collapse, so a kind of like a a mix of a more interactive and a more immersive internet against the one that we have. So okay, so the metaverse in a nutshell is this, it's kind of like a vision of what many in the computer industry today believe is the next iteration of the internet, a single, shared, immersive, persistent. It's a 3D virtual space where humans experience life in ways they could not do in the physical realm. The reason why this is, again, very interesting and very important is although, again, we have our own problems, there's also room for the dreamers. And I think the artists, that's why I keep saying the artists are often the dreamers. They're the ones who go ahead of time. They set the tone, and then technology often catches up. So art deeply challenges tech, and tech is always drawing its inspiration from art. Yeah. So for anybody who writes fiction, sci-fi, for anybody who writes that, anybody who is interested in futurism, this would be something that's very interesting for you. But it's also an open canvas now that African players can tap into. Of course, there's a lot of speculation here, but I think the one that's very interesting for me is how much investment is going on in the metaverse or in metaverse-related innovations and startups. A report as of last year, 2023, the other one, Meta, which is Facebook, predicted that the metaverse could add about 40 billion to Africa's economy. And the people who are actually driving this thing are largely the creators. So largely, I'll talk about the experience side and the creator economy. So a lot of us have already heard of the creator economy, moving upwards into discovery and experiences. There's room and opportunities there as well. So, okay, so I'll go here to augmented reality, just giving a brief as a multimedia format of storytelling to bring to life kind of audiovisually what typically is written text. So if you are a journalist, if you write books, an author, if you do text generally, if you're a researcher like myself and you want to tap into the multimedia realm because you want to compete in a world of compete for attention with people who want 30-second TikTok videos, augmented reality is your baby. Again, I have to remind you that these technologies are very young. And I think, again, that's why it's very exciting for us that we get to plug in when they haven't been colonized yet. That is contestable, but yeah, that's where we are. And it's a really exciting time to be part of this. Again, to notice the technology is still very young, but right now we are still really relying on our gadgets. Most of these technologies, you need a medium, or what I would call an artificial hand, a prosthesis, to be able to engage with it. But so ideally screens as artificial body parts, which are detachable from your hand, but not from your life. And to be fair, we already have our mobile phones as our artificial body parts. Very few of us can put our phone for more than 2 hours without touching it. So they're kind of artificial body parts. But again, there's lots of advancements that need to happen, especially on the computer infrastructure side of things, network infrastructure. I won't bore you with that a lot, but I think massive opportunity on the content creation and the content consumption side of things. Okay, again, I'll go back to this thing where I keep emphasizing why there's never been a more exciting time to be an artist than now, because as history has shown, history has shown that the artists, or what looked like sci-fi 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, is now our reality. So Minority Report, Tom Cruise, 2002, that's like 21 years, 22 years, 23 years ago. This was a scenario, kind of like a movie claim, like what he was trying to do here is what today is augmented reality. Then it was a simulation in a film. We have seen the same with almost what we called sci-fi, almost today, almost catching up with the technologies that are being made. And I think for any artist or any storyteller or any creator, there is a massive opportunity. And I'm just throwing this up because I'm interested in foresight and futurism. There's a massive opportunity in reimagining the world, reimagining Africa 100 years, 30 years, 45 years, 20 years from now. That is where a lot of the films are going to be made from or adapted if you're a writer. there is platform for that. Adaptations are going to come out of that, and bodies of work are going to be coming out of that. So I keep emphasizing the artists kind of go ahead of time, tech catches up. Okay, so this is an example that these ideas have been, they've already been there, but in film, they're only catching up in reality now. All of you may know Black Mirror, did a fantastic job giving us a picture of the dystopian future. Again, these are lenses through the world, not necessarily ours, but this particular one was White Christmas. And in this particular piece, they were trying to give you know how on Facebook, it was Facebook that where you say you block this person, like you block them. Okay, you can block everyone anywhere. You block people. So this film, this series, this episode was trying to say that in augmented, like in real life, if I don't like you, if I don't like Roland and I'm walking and I see him from far, I can kind of block him. That was the idea here. So in this scenario, the person has blocked that person in this kind of augmented world. Yeah, but again, a lot of those pieces were cyberpunkish. A lot of them were kind of dystopian. Very few African stories. But now I think there's a strong interest in cultural diversity, new stories, alternative futures. Others call it Afrofuturism, whatever you choose to call it. Others call it your magical, whatever you choose to call it. For me, all I know is that whatever is called fiction today will become a reality at some point. And our artists allow us to have those multiple stories that are related, that are more relatable to us. So again, beyond this kind of dystopian narrative, there's multiple ways you can take the stories and the characters that you want to speak about. Okay, so here, of course, I was talking about the headsets. Yeah, we have gadgets available, but not to stress you too much. In terms of use cases, there's multiple use cases: retail, journalism, education. But let's go to the fun part now, the news. So anybody who's in journalism, for example, there is now the opportunity to augment your newspapers. Imagine Monitor or New Vision, where, while it has the static story, you can actually augment that and have a journalist go through that and give us an image of what that particular story is in an audio-visual way, multi-sensory, in sound, in image, so it's multimedia as well. So it may look like a newspaper, but I can augment, but on top of that newspaper, we can augment that story to bring it bring it more alive and give us insights into that. In terms of the value creation, as I said, there is a lot right now in the content creation landscape and the consumer landscape, because humans already are engaging with the internet as is. This simply becomes an extension of that, or a multi-sensory layering of what we already have. This we already have in terms of Snapchat, Instagram filter. This is an easy-beasy one. I always say it's the easy point of entry. Anyone in sports, I know we have AFCON coming up. Ideally, Africa would, right now, Ugandans who should be building their own assets of filters. We have all the African countries that are coming up. You create a face filter, load it on Instagram, you actually get paid for that. Similar with Snapchat, we have opportunities to do that now, to kind of create a multi-sensory and multimedia way of engagement. So that's for those who are looking at the business side of things, easy opportunity, there you go. For those in real estate, that's also a simulation of spaces that people now want to see before they buy. So anyone in the fashion business, anybody in that realm, you have the opportunity to augment or simulate and give people snapshots into what it is that they are doing. Oh yeah, if I go back to social, I think one of the biggest industries that has unlocked social, this kind of filter, is the fashion and beauty, specifically the beauty industry. So makeup, etc. Now people can actually test out different types of colors and palettes and contours and all of those things in immersive in AR before you actually purchase or acquire something online. So those are some of the business use cases. Museum spaces, of course, this is something very close to my heart. I give us a narrative already, is how do you bring artifacts to life? So anybody who's a storyteller in the museum space, there's an opportunity to kind of augment and bring to life, add sound, add video, add interactivity, immersiveness to objects. Social impact, I use this as social impact, but I can also use it as a map guide. This particular one, I know Kampala, for example, is going through a remapping of all the, what are they called, the signages, yeah, to their local, they're pulling down the colonial names and giving new names, and people don't know who those people are. So AR allows you to augment that if I go to Saapo Lokagwa, and I see that logo, if I augment it, it should be able to awaken and tell me who this guy was, what he does, and why he actually gets this name. So ideally, museums become embedded everywhere that we go. Books 2.0 is literally bringing live video, sound, interactivity to your book works. Yeah, so there's ways to layer that beyond just text. This is an opportunity for people to make your books more interactive and more immersive. You can gamify. Those are all multimedia formats of enjoying and consuming books. Okay. For those in the education field, I think we all remember this in chemistry class. So anybody who is producing any form of literature, to be honest, it could be sci-fi, it could be you know, a journal, it could be a research paper, it could be, you know, a book for children. There is an opportunity to bring those objects to life in a way that we would not traditionally get them. For those of us who did chemistry, I think all of us did, you know, when they were trying to explain to you one hydrogen and two H2, two hydrogens and two oxygen and one oxygen, how they come together. This is, you know, ways in which to bring to life some of those pieces, and that's on the education side of things. Okay, so let's play. This ideally would happen if we were in a physical space, but here is a snapshot of so many AR pieces that I will share with you. Please find the time to find one and just test it out and see how it goes. There's a lot from the whole world, and I think all the tools are converging just for you to excel. The rules haven't been set yet. The rules may not necessarily be set yet anytime soon. Accessing these tools is way cheaper. Others are free than the traditional ways in which, you know, the costs that went into traditional storytelling. So there's a lot of room to just experiment. And yeah, again, the future of African storytelling is emotive. It is going to be immersive. It's going to be culturally rich. It's going to be we're going to unlock a new wave of intelligence, a new wave of storytelling that the world has possibly never seen. I also reemphasize and say, for me, these technologies are the most African of all technologies that I've experienced. And the reason I say that is a tool like artificial intelligence gives the idea that there is humans can be mirrored. Yeah, humans can be, the human mind can be mirrored. But again, a lot of African knowledge systems and the ways in which they were documented and the ways in which they existed, sometimes people call that spirituality. It's literally a snapshot of this. There's nothing new under the sun. Innovations just kind of morph. And one of the things that I really love is for us to not look at these tools as too foreign, and to look at them and figure and kind of lock it to what is familiar. For me, virtual reality was very immediate because it looked very similar to the way storytelling was told, storytelling or stories were told or told in traditional African formats. They were experiential, they were inclusive, they were interactive. It was for the collective, and these tools kind of do that. AI, for example, while the contestation is around compound, what is it called? Who owns the IP? especially in a capitalistic world that believes that IP is individual. AI is very similar to how African knowledge has been compounded. For a long time, knowledge was communal. You never individually owned it. You simply built on what your forefathers gave you, morphed it and shared it forward. Nobody rigidly took ownership of that. So for me, I think it's democratizing knowledge. It is our literature cannot be locked in British museums and libraries. We should be able to have access to that because those were our stories. Those were our ancestors, and that was our body of knowledge. So for me, I look at it as a decolonial tool that is allowing me to reclaim and compound on knowledge. I can learn any particular topic, any day, anything that I want to do, and be able to, I no longer need 1,000 PhD students in a conference room. What I really need is high level knowledge in a particular subject, and then creativity is where the creators win. So for my end, in a nutshell, these tools, the winner in all of this is really the creator, and the winner in all of this as well is the person who is curious. I think anybody with a curious mind will thrive in times such as these. Some of the jobs for the future don't exist now, but they will exist, and they're going to be born out of these tools. But yeah, so anyway, be bold, experiment, remix tradition and innovation. You have a buffet of tools. Again, a challenge to go away with is please do test a short story from start to finish. Wear the multiple hats and use the different formats of whether it's AI to create and then XR in this particular format, augmented reality. I didn't talk about virtual reality because that one has a very different creation channel, which may not necessarily be particularly easy to plug in, but AR is an easy guy. And what that allows us to do is that you have a body of IP, and I know all of you have bodies of IP. You can kind of create tangents of different formats of your own, of one piece of IP using tools such as this. Yeah, and you become the custodians of our stories. So please go share with the world and tell the world all the wonderful stories that's coming out of this continent. Okay, too much talking. I've talked for 1 hour. I'll stop there. Roland, please jump in. If that was too much information, please bear with me. I wanted to open up the next phase of the conversation to your thoughts. Where did I end? Okay, no, yeah. Any thoughts, any comments? What are you feeling? Contestations, anxieties, all of the above. And if there are specific questions that you'd want us to dive into, we can use the next phase to go through that as well. Okay. I'll go back to my other slide of creating.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you. I think you covered a lot in 1 hour, in one presentation, and just kind of gave us a nice overview. I posted a poll while you were presenting, just asking people if they have used AI. I don't know if you can see the responses or if people have responded.
Let me come to the poll. Just give me a second. Let me stop sharing.
Okay, so I've sent it. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how the people here have what their thoughts, what their experiences are with the technology. I think personally, in terms of storytelling, one of the challenges that I had always had with Muwado is getting images to go with the stories. So what happens with that is, you know, before I was wiser, you just go on Google and put in the search that was relevant to the story, and then go to the image section and see what you could pick there. That's before I learned that you need to credit, and people's images, some may be paid for. So a couple of emails came in, some cease and desist emails came in saying you need to take down this image or pay this much because you, and it's like, wow, okay, this is serious. So I think what I have liked about the AI wave is now it's very easy to just go and put in your prompts and generate something that captures the essence of the story and then can then be a featured image because you know the image helps, you know, when you're sharing, when you're sharing the story, even when people are consuming it, if there's an image, then it's just better. It helps people have visual pictures. So that's been one of the best parts of having AI for me. Just the ability to just tell it, this is what I want generated. Then you can go through different variations and then have something that captures the essence of the story. And then you can do that with multiple parts of the story, which I haven't done, but it's something I want to do so that you can generate images to go along with the story. And then it's almost like a comic at that point. So yeah, that I have also experimented with using AI, ChatGPT's voice feature, for transcribing. So you speak to it, kind of tell the story, and then you know it helps you with prompts here and there. So it's conversational, and then if you're having a block, I have found this helpful. You just chat with it. When you're done with the conversation, it will give you a transcript of all that you've chatted about, and that can serve as a first draft of the story. And then you can even ask it to rewrite it for you into some kind of. So yeah, it's nice to if you're, and this is me speaking as someone who's been having a very long writer's block. Yeah, that's been useful as well. So I was sharing my experience. I don't know if you have time to hear the rest other people's experiences, but also I hope you've had a break to from the speaking.
I've had a break. Yes, it would be lovely. Roland, you said so you've used Chat GPT. What other tools have you experimented with apart from the because I'd wanted to hear your what the output looks like in a tool such as Chat, like if you're using that like Chat GPT versus maybe what DALL-E or Midjourney. I know Midjourney is paid, so that's the problem, but it's yeah,
Yes.
but because right now there's also the platforms or even Canva. Like I struggle with Canva's AI generated images because they are the least, to me, they are the least mature. I feel like they're very, yeah, but we can test something like that once we go through the room. I was just, yeah, just to see the difference when we prompt on, let's say, ChatGPT and we are prompting images versus prompting images on Canva, and we'll kind of compare the two. And also the kinds of prompts that go into it. I think that's also the thing that distinguishes, the level of output is how specific you are and how good you are at prompting. Then prompting becomes this kind of additional skill that everybody kind of has to have. Prompt engineering, yeah. That's a good question. That's a really good question, Trevor. And so LLM for everyone else in the room, that's large language model. So typically, maybe just a step backwards on how these tools work or how machine learning or artificial intelligence grounded on machine learning is built, is that you feed it with information and train an algorithm to output a particular thing. So you kind of train them with large data sets. So you have to feed it with a lot of information. And I'd mentioned this, I think that's one of the things that I added at the beginning, where Africa's biggest asset is. So there are two elements. There is the content creator side, which is where we are. And then there's the technical side, which is still content creation, which is who is building these large language models, who is training the algorithms, right? So who are the engineers who are building specific models or algorithms that feed into these that feed into these algorithms or these tools. So what Trevor is saying is experimenting, for example, with you're trying to prompt Uganda and it's not giving you anything. It goes back to how much has it been trained? Probably very limited training. Right now, there is lots of interest in that, in democratizing the language. So if you're looking at the research side, for those of you who are interested, you'll see there's a lot of interest in building larger language model banks. I think Google Ghana is largely doing that. And most of the people who are doing data science are also heavily invested in that. So as I said, again, these tools are simply, most of them have been trained on the internet. Yeah. And the internet today, the one that we have, is almost 5% of the world's information. And how I know this is, luckily, a few years ago, when I was at Google, that was Google's mission, to make the world's information universally accessible. And at that point, it was only 5%. So 95% of the world's information is not digitized and does not sit on the internet. What that means is that then these tools are being trained on a very tiny data set, okay? And that's why we are seeing a lot of interest around, the tools cannot, they don't, okay, when you prompt, for example, Blackness or Black people or Africa, it gives you a certain idea. We can even test it here. Like, show me, let me just try this here. Sure. Can you generate an image of a hospital? Okay, and then if we test, okay, a hospital in Uganda, it's going to give you a certain kind of image, which is, I always say they're kind of brownish. It looks like it's a scene out of a Mexican. It gives you this, oh, this is better. Hospital in okay, this is better. This is on this is Canva. However, if I tested this out, I think the last time we tested it was on, I think it was ChatGPT. It gave a very strange image, a very kind of those rural brownish images of what a hospital in Uganda would look like, versus if you prompted a hospital somewhere else. So there is, because who is training, first of all, who owns the data, who is training and who is building the models? We are feeding these tools with data sets. But who owns the data? A lot of it doesn't really sit here. And that's why there's, again, a huge opportunity, especially for technologists and engineers. Anybody who wants to build large data sets, there is a huge opportunity for that to be able to sit, to feed these models. Now, that's a problem on this other side. The other problem, so right now the tools, for a lot of the people who are really using these tools, as Roland said, and as you've probably experienced, Trevor, is you've had to kind of train it with time. So if you've been prompting some particular topic for a very long period of time, it begins to understand, this is how Lorna, these are Lorna's interests, this is how Lorna thinks, these are the things that she talks about, and it will begin to adapt to your style. But that, again, is you feeding it with data, because as you're prompting, you're technically feeding it with data. Something that, and that's why the image prompts came in quite strongly, is then people felt text was not adequate enough. I needed an image. And therefore, when you upload an image, it's picking new data sets from you to be able to optimize and figure out what to output for you. So right now, the tools are getting better. Right now, they're getting better because they're also sitting on data from individuals, and they are able to output better. Where you want to see a nice use case of an LLM is Twitter's, I think, is it Grok? Grok on Twitter. Now, Grok is the one which I have seen, because of its interaction with a lot of people who are diverse and speaking their own language. I see a lot of people prompting back to Grok in Uganda. And it will respond, like, okay, not perfectly, but it is there. It actually responds back really nicely in Uganda, but with also an undertone of the person that prompted. So if somebody says, wama Grok, da 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 da, it will also come back and say, Wamazi Muzee, because for some reason it has picked that a lot of people on Twitter responding, bantering on what's on Twitter, on X, have that kind of thing, and it has learned and trained itself in that format. For prompt engineering, this one is where I think this is what now separates the beginner, the kind of the intermediary person, and then the expert. Is unfortunately you have to learn how to prompt engineer. And prompt engineer is simply being able to articulate, and I think that's what the beauty of, that's what separates, that's where creativity then thrives. It's going back to first principle thinking, because these tools are still computers and they operate in first principle thinking. If you remember in math, we were taught, solve this equation, but in first principles. It goes back to the bare minimum. Now you need to be able to speak to it from that level. You have to go back and say, I don't know who you are. You don't know what I'm doing. I'm training a child. And how do I speak to somebody in the most explicit way? Describe. If you want a flower, there are 7 billion flowers. However, if you want a rose, I can give you a rose, but there's also 100 other species of roses. I don't know, black, blue, there's all of those. But if you want a red rose with thorns, you have to be able to spell that out. Now, those who have computer backgrounds or computer engineering or computer science backgrounds, you would remember how you wrote software. You literally have to write, if this, then that, do this, put the text, and you're writing line by line. So you cannot bundle a whole kind of encyclopedia and put it there and expect it to think for you. What you have to do is you have to go line by line. I would like, I don't know, a Japanese themed, I don't know, paint in blue or pink, and you have to be that specific. The more specific you are, the better it generates. And as it outputs, you're like, I like that one. And it tells you, please select which one of these 3 you like. And now when you select and say, oh, these ones, this is the closest to what I described, but can you go a bit deeper? So then prompt engineering, the question is, how do you become a better prompt engineer? To be honest, experiment. It's tinkering, but it's also your checking your mind, your thinking process. I think that's what when I think of prompt engineering, it's simply, how do you think? And it wants you to think in almost first principles. You have to be able to articulate what you want line by line. And when you do that, the results become more beautiful. And the more you prompt and the more you experiment, it begins to get a better sense of what you want, and it will begin to generate towards to the closest you can possibly head to. Yeah, the closest asset you can get, closest to what you're imagining in your mind. That is how I would say it. It's just tinkering, experimenting, but also what would be useful for me, what has been useful is, how do artists think? Because a lot of these things are generating off people's, it's like how the human mind works. So if you look at a painter, how a painter's draw, like if you want to borrow from Van Gogh's strokes, how did Van Gogh paint? Now, when you understand, and there's a lot of material around that, when you go and understand how he painted, you'll be in a better position to articulate that. If I'm looking at a particular piece of work that I like, how does the artist, or how did the artist go about creating? And when you tap into the mind of the creator, then you'll also begin to see that the richness of AI is really for the creators. That's what separates the mimic and the creator. So almost all creators who are experimenting with their original framework of creating end up creating bodies of work which kind of mirror what they're already seeing. So it becomes a piece of original work, almost original work. Versus if I literally say I want a painting and just give me a bit of Van Gogh's brush strokes, it will also generate something like that. So for prompt engineering, tinker with this tool, make it your friend. There's a couple of YouTube resources that I can also share that I find are very useful, very easy to work with, that can speak largely about how to train your mind, but also how to train your thinking. because how your mind works is how it will relate back to you. And I would say this thing or these tools are really a creator's land, a playground, because if you bring your technical expertise, which you already have, and tinker with these tools, you'll find that the work that you're creating will almost, to be fair, it's almost original work than Lorna, who is prompting and saying, I just want a film that is exactly like, or a song that sounds like Davido's number 5. Just give it to me. It will speak like that. It will also generate according to what it knows about Davido. But if you're prompting for yourself and you keep building and you keep studying, you realize that you're creating your own kind of assistant that mirrors your mind. And I think that's where I think prompt engineering is that when that separates you from everybody else. And I think that's where artistic work and creative freedom cannot be stolen. I hope I answered your question, Trevor. Yeah, but I think for me, it's experimenting, resourcing. I can share a few resources on some of those, what I found useful in regards to prompting. And it's phased prompting. It's also not too much. If you give it too much information, it gets locked. So it's the same as creating a body of work. When I think of painting, or you start with the sketch, then you add the color. So if you go layer by layer by layer, then you find yourself, creating work that's very similar to your process. However, if I go and just load it all with data, it's not going to get, the outputs are going to be absolutely different. I'll try, but let me try. As you were speaking, I was trying to pull out an article that came out last week. I'm just trying to find it, and I can drop it in the chat before my chain of thought kind of disappears. Yeah, and it was talking about why generalists will thrive in the AI time. And I hope it answers, I'm going to use that as a building block to your question. I'm just trying to find that article so I can share it with everybody. And you know, in times such as ours, I think the beauty of these technologies is what they're doing is converging disciplines as opposed to kind of diverging them. So I think the previous industrial revolution or the previous age, there was a lot of specialization where everybody had to kind of pick because, you know, the knowledge economy needed accountants, it needed all of this, and you had those specific jobs to do. And that's how careers or jobs were created. You had to pick a particular one. But if you went before that, I think it was in the 19th century. And in that century is when, especially in the Western world, you saw a lot of philosophers, and a lot of these guys were, if you look at people like, I don't think it's Aristotle, no, somebody like Pythagoras or somebody like, there was a guy who is quite fascinating. He was very many things. Oh, who's this guy? No, even if we use Leonardo da Vinci, let me use that guy. Leonardo da Vinci I think he was everything. He was an alchemist here, but then he was like an artist there, and then he's a scientist here, and then he was everything. And in those times, there was a like everybody had the skill or had the bare minimum skill to know a range of topics, so that if we call you for war, you're ready to go for war. If we call you for, I don't know, blacksmithing, you're ready. Like everybody had that. And that was lost over the past couple of decades, centuries, and now we are beginning to see a convergence again. To your question, building on that, Olga, is again, we are living at very interesting times where although it does look like our formats of history or our formats of knowledge were not documented, they truly were documented, but not in the formats in which the rest of the world recognizes them. So the Western world typically recognizes tangible formats, so print, so, you know, put them in libraries or put them in museums or artifacts. And that's how documentation was done. And then for a continent like ours, because we did not have those prints in one library, Timbuktu had technically, but it was burnt down with all of that information. We were told we did not have story, or we did not have knowledge. We don't have that. But what's also happening now is that as part of digitization, we are seeing a lot more people interested in capturing or reclaiming pieces of knowledge in the formats in which they existed, intangible, and capturing them in more tangible formats. What I said earlier about tools like AI and also tools like immersive is that they kind of look like the old formats in which we documented, and that's why I have a natural lean towards them. A natural lean towards them. But again, as you said rightfully, where is Africa in this conversation? But also, what's the level of urgency, and what are the things that we need to fix immediately? It's built to the previous question that Trevor was asking. If people are building all these large language models, where are we in building these large data sets? Okay, so there seems to be a lot of interest on the content creation side or the creation side, but then very little effort being in building or customizing or optimizing our own algorithms. But the good news is, as you said, there is a convergence happening. Anthropologists, philosophers, medical practitioners, researchers, artists are now working in the same room. And then we are compounding knowledge from all kind of directions at once in ways that we have never seen before. So right now you have more access to information than we could possibly have before. I don't know the particular statistic, but I was looking at how much data is generated daily online, and it's in the giga. I don't know. There's a word after giga. Something by it's really large data sets that are being generated by all of us just being on the web. That was generated in 2023. That since the internet began had never been generated. So we are generating a lot more data now. And that's where the interest is on how do you decolonize those data sets, and how do you include all formats of Africa in building those models or building those data sets that then feed these models. Olga, I think my mind has gone in multiple directions, but I hope I've been able to give a sneak peek, just a little bit into your question. But as you said, for me, it's getting more people in the same room. Artists can no longer work alone. Engineers can no longer work. Yes, it's a terabyte. Yes, yeah, there are huge terabytes of data that are being generated, but we can no longer work siloed. It's no longer technology for the engineers or technology for the artists. It's all of us are in the same room. Because you are the ones creating the story. You are the custodians of your history. You have the opportunity to access it now more than ever, but also have the agency to choose what to include, because that's also my mentor. I had a call with my mentor recently, and the contestation was, what if all knowledge is not meant to be shared? What if all, I think that's also the thing about African history. There was knowledge that was reserved and was kind of guarded. So in this new way, kind of world where knowledge is accessible for everyone, what if knowledge was, yes, hidden wisdom? So we also, as custodians, have to be custodians and decide what do we want to include, what do we want to exclude, what remains hidden knowledge, what remains knowledge for the public good. But the responsibility still entirely lies on us to choose how we participate. But there is no room not to participate, because if we choose not to participate, and then we'll see a repeat of what has happened before happen again. So again, it's an exciting time. It's a very exciting time to be alive again for me, but it's also a very exciting time for everybody to have a role to play. This thing is not only for techies, it literally is for everybody. And the beauty about it is that you have the heart. You can tomorrow wear the heart of a medical practitioner. It's not that you're operating anybody, no, but you have enough information to be able to remix and compound that collective knowledge and capture it in formats that can be archived, but also you have the agency to choose what needs to be told, what can be hidden, kept hidden, what remains sacred. The power is still entirely in your hands. For storytellers, I think I kept saying earlier, there's nothing new under the sun. The world history seems to repeat itself in a way that what looks new today, the past, present, and future kind of they kind of morph into each other and then they move on. The past becomes the present and then the present becomes the past, something like that. So we will see an awakening of past histories, even if we may lose, we may think we have lost them. I'm 100% convinced that with the world being a kind of an equal playing field, we are going to see the reemergence of what we thought was lost, because somebody was a custodian. It's just that they were not documented in libraries, but I'm sure somebody is a custodian and that knowledge is still being passed on. Our responsibility is to then choose how we want to participate in this global platform. A mouthful again, I could talk forever about these things, but I do not want to go in tangible direction. Olga, I hope I attempted to answer your question, but there were very many directions in which my mind was heading. Hope I did some justice to that. I think when it comes to regulation, one, I am a believer that do not overregulate to cripple innovation. I also think you can only regulate what you understand. I also think you can only regulate what you are actually contributing to. So 3 things. One, Africa needs to get a seat on the table. As I said earlier, these technologies are still young. They have not been colonized yet. We have an opportunity as a collective to get a seat on the table. How do you get a seat on the table? You are actually building the infrastructure for this global conversation. How? AI, again, is a technology that is sitting and learning off encyclopedias of knowledge, data sets. So if you don't have any data sets, then you kind of, you're erased. That's actually the word, you're erased. And we see that a lot in when we talk about Africa, the global south, but also when we talk about minority groups like women, you know? So for me, it's get a seat on the table. How do you get a seat at the table? Build, yeah? Build hard things, you know? And that's why, again, previously I said I was speaking really largely for the people who are going to build that infrastructure, the data sets, the ones who are going to feed into those algorithms. So we need to build our own data sets, right? And then regulate for ourselves. So typically African regulation is top-bottom, meaning it typically comes from UNESCO, or I mean kind of the West. And then UNESCO nicely adopts it, ratifies it through the AU, and everybody else comes through. I think Africa needs to decide what its agenda is, and build selflessly and selfishly for that agenda. Again, I keep insisting, technologies are very peculiar in Africa. Like some of this, the market is so peculiar and we'll use it probably different. So we need to decolonize regulation. Can we regulate for ourselves? But can we not steal for innovation, right? And therefore we have to have that sense of agency. So those are the 2. So regulate for ourselves, quite selfishly, but also selflessly. But also secondly, get a seat on the table, build hard things. Meaning we have to train a whole caliber of engineers and all kinds of technologists, but also multidisciplinary people to understand that this thing is for the collective and everybody needs a seat at the table. So that's that. Then the 3rd thing I think, which is most exciting for me, is the technology, the future of the job. I think for me, it's the job market is importing, what is it called? Jobs. Africa is young, the young people, the entire pipeline that is going to power up this thing for the world, but also for us, sits in our biggest asset, which is our people, to be honest. So training, making sure that Africa's tech savvy, switched on young people have this thing as their friend, yeah, and plug in. So for me, it's skills development, training people for the future work, but training Africa as the workforce for the future of the workforce for the entire world. And it's going to be grounded on this. So Olga, those are my 3 things. 1, decolonize regulation. We regulate for ourselves. We don't cripple innovation. But also secondly, we have to get a seat on the table. If you're not included, then we can't complain. And then thirdly, absolutely, our biggest asset is our talent. Is our young people. and they are going to be the workforce of the future. The future jobs don't exist. The kinds of jobs that are going to emerge, we don't even know them today, but we will prepare the next generation. And this generation, at least I'll be there to see that Africa really is powering up in all parts of the value chain. Yeah. Sorry, that was long, but still 3 points. Okay. And then I leave this large screen of mine as well to educate, and just remind that these technologies are really will go in the direction in which we choose to let them go. Yeah, and we have the power to do that. Any other question? Or back to you, Roland.
Trevor, I hope they also answered you as well, because you had left an add-on in the chat box. I think my question around this being us having the opportunity to get ahead of the curve. I think I worry about, they talk about AI, the server requirements and the energy requirements, and how it's now just kind of becoming a small group of people who have the resources that are going to now end up controlling the data, and hence, I guess, the AI. So in that sense, do we then have that much power? Because even the training, we may go there and use it, and I guess add our own little flavor to it. But then you have things like I don't know if you've experienced this, but when in the AI detectors, the question that keeps on coming up is that the markers for AI content is good English, or very, very complicated English words, which for us is just things that we do.
Yeah.
It's it's the way we use the language. So small things like that, we're already seeing that coming through. Um, so I don't know what then is our move. Do we then be like we control the minerals? So before we take our minerals, um, first come and build a factory here. I think I saw what's this Zimbabwean billionaire who is partnering with at one of the big AI to build the first AI data center in Africa. So yeah, how much power do we actually have? Or are we just going to be fighting for our space all over again? Even if it's
Yeah.
Chinese AIs.
Yeah. In terms of, so by power you mean like power, or you mean like energy to power the machine? Which power? Because both apply. If it's for power to power up the machine, we have just gotten oil goes in, which I think we'll be able to fund. And I'm digressing. But the point, I think the point of, do we have the power? I think power is taken, to be honest. I don't think anybody will give you power if we are talking about power in the sense of being invited to the table, being given, being included in this global conversation. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of regulation or interest around regulation. Is everybody is scared that the technologists or the techies are going to take everybody's job, and the lawyers and everybody else is going to end up jobless. And so the lawyers have had to win their power and say, let's regulate this thing. And then the feminists have had to come in and say, let us include gender, equitable, I do not know what, in the mix. And then you have the indigenous groups that are saying we have to be represented. So right now we are seeing people demanding to be included, and that's really how power distribution has happened across the board. It's even more dangerous now because we live in a very capitalistic world, and the capitalists are also coming in quite strongly to defend their own interests. But I think for me, it starts with conversation. It starts with getting like-minded people rallying behind collective and trying to make sure that your agenda is on the table. Because the truth is, I think this week, what is it called? The Blue Sea or something. What's his name? This other guy of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. They've gone to space. I mean, took people for a 15-minute trip, 14-minute trip to the moon and back. And that's private capital. That's people's personal money doing these kinds of stuff. So the question is, we can choose to have a back seat, to be honest, which the continent has done for a very long time, or we can reclaim and say, we want a seat on the table. And how do you get a seat on the table? Create, participate. There's, I think on the regulation side, as Olga said, there's a very strong legal fraternity on the continent, and globally that's really pushing for around data governance, etc. But also on the technological side, our technologists are not sleeping. They're really doing a lot of work. In fact, there's around language, around building the LLMs, there's a lot already happening in that regard. On the creator side, there's also an abundance of creators, tinkering, but all of this is happening in silos. What we need to do is come together and really say, okay, what's this thing? What do we want to use it for? And come up with a collective, what is it called? A consensus of and push forward. But truth is power. And now that Trump has gone crazy, he has made it very clear that they're not going to give you any power. They're going 100% with their motives. And we are seeing that are happening. So the rest of us, or the global south, or the rest of the world outside the USA, have to figure out, if you want to sit on the table, demand for it. How do you demand for it? Make your stuff. You either pivot and make your own stuff, or you assimilate, to be honest, and you go with what everybody else is doing, and you take whatever is offered to you. That's on the element of, do we have agency? I think we do have. I think we are living at that time where we have the platform to do that. On the other element of power, if I heard you correctly, on electricity to power up these tools, maybe that's not what you meant. DeepSeek's model has kind of trumped that narrative. Has trumped it, because they have proven that some of the scares that the OpenAI model was sharing, that this thing is so data intensive, it's so crazy, it is all of these kinds of things. These guys have been able to achieve pretty much the same or even better. China at almost a smaller amount of resources, both infrastructurally, economically, but also in terms of the powering that up. I know this is unrelated, but I'm sharing with you that document. That document, if you have the time to check it out, it talks about Moore's theory and the computational power, and if we will be able to, has it reached an end, and what will be able to power up these machines. If you have time to check through it, a wonderful friend of mine put it together, and I think it gives a snapshot on the history of technology, and how technology always catches up. If we figure out how to catch up. But at the end of the day, people are the ones who shape it, and people are the ones who decide. And I think Africa truly is the future, to be fair. In the next 50 years, actually by 2050, Africa will be the youngest continent. It is the youngest, but it will have, I think, about 50% of the world's population will sit on this continent, and majority young people. So of course, the world has to build with us, the market. We are the market. We are the labor force, and we have to begin to think along those lines. Do we have all facts together? No, but I think once we have interest and we can mobilize as a collective, I think there's a path to go. In terms of I think you talked about I think it's OpenAI building with that guy, the one putting together data center. Those are small strides. There's countries like Nigeria right now that are very, very aggressive on their AI and tech manifesto, largely driven by one of our dear friends who started in the tech field and is now in a political space, and he's bringing that agenda quite strongly. So you'll see a lot of Nigeria dominating the space. Similarly, you'll see a country like Rwanda that say, we may not have the best, but what we can do is create a platform for everybody to come in. And while you're here, we'll have our 5 gorillas that will market to you, and we'll be able to come up with, economic returns to be able to sustain their country. So you find those small glimmers of hope that make me truly believe that, the continent, with the right mindset, is on the right track. Okay, I know we've run out of time, so I'll let you back, Roland, to be able to close. But thank you so much, everybody, for bearing with me as I went through this monologue for 2 hours. Thank you so much.
All right. Guys, you know the drill. If you can stay longer and Lorna is willing, we don't mind. Us here, we don't mind. But otherwise, you are free to leave at will. And yeah, usually we leave with an exercise. I don't know if you had prepared one for the people, so that they can practice and actually use some of these skills that you've passed on.
Let me pull
Yeah.
back
So
the.
if no one else, hmm?
Let me see. Can anyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see from here.
So here was my practical assignment, is that please go out there. It doesn't matter what field you're in. Oh, also what would be, yeah, I think I can also share with in the group. I'll share with Roland and he can share. We have, there's a 30-day prompting challenge. There's a 30-day prompting challenge that my friends and I are doing on AI. So I will share that with you if you'd like to join. So it's super simple. It's literally just saying every day for the next 30 days, prompt something. Yeah. And as simple as with using ChatGPT. Then once you have that, please do take on a fully fledged project. Create, I created this, create a short digital story using Canva video. You have your text already, you have your script created on ChatGPT, then move on to Canva and create a video, or try Midjourney and Runway to Midjourney to create your images, and then Runway to create your video, take image to video, and just try and see how your comic series will emerge, or how your story will emerge. In terms of storyline, I really encourage everyone to test out fiction. Fiction meaning go as something that just doesn't exist, but ground it in Africa, the Africa we want. Just go and imagine what our collective future would look like. It would be lovely if you ever get the chance. Please do share in the group on the channel. If you're comfortable doing so. And because that's the easiest way I would say be introduced to this. I'll share with Roland the challenge. Please feel free to do it at your own time. If you want to share on social media, that's great. If you want to share on the collective platform, that's fine. And then once you're done with the 30-day challenge, please do test out some of these tools. Generate your script, move it from one platform to another, and come up with, a fantastical fantasy piece on the Africa we want. That's the takeaway.
All right. I don't know. One for the road. This is my last one. This is the art of commercial storytelling. So I
Yes.
just wanted to know, are there any current opportunities in the AI space for storytellers, to make some money? Are people paying prompters? Is anyone paying for AI content? Currently, right now.
Oh, good point. I think there are lots of festivals right now that are looking for AI generated work. I can share one. I don't know if it's done. It's because the AI Runway Festival, and there's those things happening. There's also a lot of AI residencies, so Art Tech Futures residencies. I just came back from an event called the New Images in France, and it was literally people exploring new media, and platforms such as that exist. From our immediate self to market, I think the people who are really making the most money out of this, if I'm looking at the people on LinkedIn, that's where I'm seeing real winning, because people are literally able to put together thought leadership pieces, like just position themselves as subject matter experts. And the thing about platforms such as that, when you're constantly sharing your thoughts and you're packaging it nicely, I may not necessarily be a comic, but I can turn my thoughts into a comic book that somebody can read and easily consume. You're seeing a lot of translating your conversions, from, oh, I saw this piece of work of yours, and then I'm inviting you to do something like for a paid opportunity. Those are the easy entry points. For storytellers such as yourselves, to be honest, the whole world is looking for fantastic pieces. Put your work on social media. Lots of people from around the world are going to look at your work. It may seem mediocre to you, but to somebody else, this is actually like, oh, that's great. For anyone in the animation space, especially, there's just a lot of demand for African animation. There's a lot of demand for African games. So those are the two spaces where I have really seen commercialization take up quickly. But also breaking, I think, in terms of quick to market, adaptations of your work, but also killing process. I mean, killing a mundane process. So instead of spending a lot of time trying to figure out, what to do with a script, you can actually generate so many pieces of work and commercialize it immediately. But I think at the game space, the gaming space and the animation space, to me right now, is where I'm seeing a lot of demand for storytelling, where AI work can easily be adaptable. And I'll also share with you some of those pieces. There is the Comic-Con is coming up in September in Cape Town. Is it November in Cape Town? They're looking for African game stories and narratives and all of those kinds of things. So if you're already writing literature, just translate your piece into a comic book, or translate your piece into, I don't know, an animated version. There is DJ Fest coming up, and these are hot melting points where you're going to rub shoulders with some of the biggest producers, and your piece will literally be adapted into different formats, and you can actually immediately be paid. So yeah, but off the top of my, I'll share with you as much as I can in terms of resources and places to look. But even within Uganda right now, I think the knowledge economy is the one that's going to thrive the most. Anybody who is a subject area expert, for example, Olga, who specializes in tech, literally creating literature or pieces that she can immediately share as a report. And nobody really cares whether it was AI generated. The fact is, you have created a body of work, and that's all that matters. That's what separates the creator from the one sitting on the sidelines. I hope that works.
All right, Lorna, thank you. Thank you for going beyond the agreed time and for really sharing your passion with us. I agree with I agree with Corey in the chat box. You are obviously passionate about this, so I hope the energy has rubbed off on us, and we are going to be as enthusiastic as you. So, guys, you can send your reaction emojis to thank Lorna, and I will share the resources once she share them with me, and we look forward to the stories as usual. Post them on Muwado. The platform has been a bit shaky, but yeah, we are getting to a point of stability, and then we look forward to all the stories coming up. So thank you once again for turning up. And next week we have Ankomo with our last session. You'll be talking about how to build a brand, how to just organize yourself and prepare yourself to be a commercial brand as a storyteller. So don't miss that. Tell a friend, and yeah, then we have some other things coming up for the community. So stay with us. All right, then, feel free to leave a tweet, and unless you have something to say, you can just unmute yourself and say it. But me, I'll be here till the last person leaves.
Oh, thanks everybody for the very kind words. Last, I think, as everyone drops out, Trevor, I missed your question earlier about how can policymakers and creatives ensure that AI is equitably distributed and risks mitigated, especially bias. So for me, I think I've answered this already, but the bias issue only comes from who is creating or who is contributing to the large data sets. If you're not contributing, expect bias. You can only have a seat at the table when you're creating, and that's when you can kind of address some of those. And that's why you're finding a lot of alternative groups creating pieces, data sets that hope to address that. Oh, and also something that's really important that you raised on policymakers and creatives. For the very first time, we cannot work in silos anymore. The entire value chain needs to be communicating, working together, meaning the creators, the consumers, that's the market, the technologists, I mean the policymakers, the networks, the finance, everybody has to go together. So so that nothing falls through the cracks. So we need to include our policymakers on this journey, educate them now more than ever. Otherwise, we may find ourselves in a scenario where the dangerous side of AI is amplified. I think we saw that similar thing done on blockchain, and then with regulation kind of blocking this thing. But if you include your policymakers, and the good news now more than ever, we have some really switched on policymakers in there. You have the networks, they are the lobbyists. The legal fraternity becomes an ally. So again, this is a multidisciplinary industry, and everybody needs to walk that journey together. Once we do that, I think it's going to be an excellent win for Uganda and an excellent win for the continent. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for showing up, and thanks for allowing me. Roland, an absolute delight for allowing me to share this body of work with, it was just a kind of scratch of the surface, but hopefully it could spark some interest in the people who did attend. Thank you so much, Roland.
All right, guys, follow Lorna on social media. She talks more about these things, keeps on sharing updates. So yeah, this shouldn't be the end of this. If you want to know more, she's a great resource on the socials. Okay, guys, I think I'll end the meeting. Otherwise, we'll keep on adding things, which is not a bad thing per se, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.